solutions against HIV. Within the National AIDS Control Council, in addition to the leadership of our CEO, Dr. Ruth Masha, we also have Dr. Vernon Muchache, who's seated at the extreme right, who himself is a researcher and is well known to most of you. He leads our policy and strategy arm, and without research, policy and strategy cannot be implemented. So Dr. Vernon and your team, we thank you even for bringing the researchers on board, including Dr. Ngure, our chairman of the conference, who has done a stellar job. We remain committed to working steadily and progressively with all our stakeholders to address barriers to an effective HIV response, and with programs that put people living with HIV, especially young people and adolescents, at the core and at the center of the work we do. Our chief guest, as you listen to me this morning, allow me now to reflect on the dual global epidemics and their impact on lives of many communities worldwide, and especially on the HIV response in Kenya. Our most vulnerable in society, the elderly, the poor, the immunocompromised, those in informal employment, women and children have to bear the brunt of the disruption of livelihoods, education, food security, economic disproportions, and higher risk of HIV. One of the programs I worked on early in my life was the issues around inheritance rights for women within Luo Nyanza and also in Meru. And I remember our funder then, he said, asking, but what is the link? As Dr. Sangale, who's on my board, will attest, a patient will not adhere to treatment if they're hungry. A patient will not prioritize going for TB treatment if they're sleeping outside with their children. Livelihoods is very important. And food, as we have said from the very beginning, and this has been a rallying call by Nelson and the team, food is a critical issue for people to adhere. And so I want to mention that the livelihoods conversation should not fall off the table. The support of people living with HIV should not fall off the table. Tamu Daniels, you're also listening, you're the head of PEPFAR here in Kenya. I really want you to talk about, and even as you work on your next plan, issues around inclusion of psychosocial support, including the faith-based sector, so that we make sure that by the time the person comes to the doctor, 80% of the cure has already come from knowing that they are not alone. So evidence of continuing spread of COVID in areas of high HIV prevalence raises concerns on its impact on the delivery and uptake of HIV services. Further, we see the adverse impact of social distancing measures on mental health, community cohesion, and support. And I want to note and acknowledge that the impact on mental health has been highest in adolescents and young people, but doctors have also taken a very heavy hit. And so even as we look at our research, let's take care of the person who provides care for us. And for young people, I am okay is not a statement that any parent should take at face value. And so I know that the levels of depression and clinical care has gone up recently, but many people are still not accessing. It is, however, reassuring to note the emerging innovation and resilience of the Kenyan people, despite far-reaching disruptions that has informed the theme of this conference. Innovation has been demonstrated in the development and deployment of differentiated health delivery of health services such as through mobile, telehealth, and other digital programs, community health volunteers, and cross-programmatic integration. HIV and COVID have taught us that as a world, we are just one global village. You cannot say that I am okay if your neighbor is not okay. Our resilience as a people here in Kenya has been marked by communities' ability to maintain the family and other social ties that hold our society together, leveraging on deeply rooted social capital to ensure that no one was left suffering. We held harambes for food and medical bills, and even as we are sitting here, I don't think there's anyone here in Kenya who's not a member of several WhatsApp groups. I think we have contributed till we realize now we actually have more money than we think we have, right? There has been a lot of contributions taking care of each other. So we have held harambes for food and medical bills. We have obtained rent concessions, holding one another in the quest to stand together. My bank and others that I know have also held out concessions for people who are not able to pay their loans. And the goal has been that no one actually dies from their suffering and from economic challenges. I am concerned about the informal sector. A lot of people are earning a daily wage, and so when we close our doors, it becomes difficult for them to get food. So can I call you, as Kenyans, we have always taken care of each other. Can we make sure that everybody has food at their table, if nothing else, because that will assist in making sure that everything else is taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, although Africa has confounded predictions of a COVID apocalypse, complacency is not an option. Lessons we have learned across social systems and public health must be carried forward, as the impact on livelihoods must outlive that on the epidemic. The NACC remains committed to strengthening evidence-based decision-making, knowledge management for strategic information, and strengthening inclusive participation of all stakeholders, both internal and external, in shaping the new normal. I mentioned a global village. So right now I know we have people signed on from across the world. The research will be presented is not only from Kenya. So I want you to recognize, although we'll be honoring the 6 Kenyan researchers, it is because we are seeking for local-based solutions. We want our people to be able to do the research. My goal, even as I look at WHO and UNAIDS and the US government, can we now move towards, aside from ICASA, an Africa Research Conference, so that we can make sure we actually collate and look at the research and the gaps that is coming from Africa. Our chief guest, as I conclude, allow me to remind all researchers, policymakers, scholars, and indeed all you participants present on the need to actualize and implement HIV research findings and resolutions to make them work. Doing so will reinvigorate our efforts in ending the epidemic. As a council and as the leader of this team, we restate our commitment to provide the necessary oversight, strengthen ties with stakeholders and communities, and in ensuring that whatever programs and interventions we put in place after this conference are actually operationalized. And Dr. Ngugi, I want to hold your feet to the fire, that whatever it is that we come up with here, we actually create a roadmap for implementation. I am not interested in a conference for conference sake. At the age where I am right now, most of us are looking at issues around legacy, and the legacy I would like to leave is a transformed society, not just where we came to talk and we went home. To all participants, I am humbled by your relentless support and participation in the HIV response. It's been 30 plus years. We have not tired. When we were in the Amsterdam conference about 2 years ago, the women that Dorothy and others started with, I think out of almost 36 of them, I think there were only 2 that were still remaining. And so Dorothy, today I want to acknowledge you and all the other women worldwide who braved the epidemic to be able to speak up, so that young people like our sister here, Cherop, can be able to speak. So before I call on the CAS, I want to acknowledge my chair, my CAS, Mutai Kagwe. He's actually literally our chair because he's the one who manages all the chairs of the various corporations. So Mutai Kagwe has been supportive. He has really worked on reforms and made sure that we have everything that we need to make it happen. I also want to acknowledge our CS, Yakuri Atani, who, together with his team, made sure there was an allocation for HIV, malaria, and TB commodities. We are very, very thankful. And my representative, Mr. Patrick Mashari on the board, kindly convey our gratitude to the PS and on to the CS, because that is important to us. And it is the 2 CSs working together, and obviously the overall leadership by Our Excellency, the President Uhuru Kenyatta, that makes my work, even in the HIV epidemic, so not easy, but doable, and it is also a pleasure to do it. So without further ado, can I now invite our CAS, Dr. Masi Mwagangi, to please address us. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Siparo. I see you want to give me a new name and call me Mrs., so I'll appreciate that. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Hello, are you able to hear me?
We are soon getting her. It's the technology.
Hello? Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you can boost the sound now.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. the chair, Angeline Siparo, for making this conference possible and for inviting us here today. Thank you also to the session chair, Mr. Kenneth Gure, who's done a fantastic job of highlighting all the objectives that we intended to meet in today's session. And at the end of this conference, all the things that we want to have learned and how we intend to apply those lessons. Thank you to Ruth Libon Masha, who continues to do exceptional work as the CEO of NACC, as well as all the other key stakeholders who work with us when it comes to HIV management and control, recognizing the role that WHO plays. Dr. Rudy Eggers, thank you so much for your presence here, as well as those who will be joining us virtually, the ED, Gwini Banyima, the ED from UNAIDS, Dr. Tamu Daniel from PEPFAR, recognizing the good work that Dr. Catherine Bugia has done from the Ministry of Health, NACC, as well as county governments who are present here, appreciating the presence of the chair of the Health Committee of COG, Prof. Anyanyong. And thank you to everyone else who I may not have mentioned your presence here today. And so, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I welcome you all to Maisha HIV/AIDS Conference 2021. Let me start by saying that we have indeed made strides in living in our new normal. I'm aware we have participants drawn from far and wide following this conference virtually, a true affirmation of the innovation and resilience we'll be speaking of today. And I must particularly commend the choice of this year's event theme, towards the last mile, resilience and innovation. And listening to the conference chair as well as the chair of NACC, I can see how indeed this is the time for us, particularly as a country, as we work towards the control of HIV, to really adopt all the innovative mechanisms that we've been able to learn through, and particularly from our researchers who have been able to present to us new thoughts, new ideas, new knowledge that then requires to be translated into action. And then, of course, when we speak of resilience, I think Kenya has done exceptionally well, particularly recognizing that we are now going through a pandemic. And indeed, I can tell you teams within the Ministry of Health and NACC have really put in great effort in ensuring that there's a continuity of service when it comes to HIV care. And this is amidst great constraints, both financial constraints, political, economic constraints. However, the team has been able to put in place a lot of work to ensure that these services are available. We are just a few years shy of meeting our commitment to end AIDS by 2030, and therefore we need to accelerate our progress in this last stretch. I'm however happy to note we've made significant strides in this regard. By 2020, Kenya had reduced annual AIDS-related deaths from a high of 166,000 in 2007 to about 20,897 in 2020. New annual HIV infections have been reduced from over 140,000 in 2008 to 41,000 thereabouts in 2020. And HIV prevalence rates have come down from 14% in the mid-90s to 4.5% in 2020. And this indeed is remarkable progress in the fight against HIV. However, despite these gains, Kenya is one of the African countries with the highest level of HIV, and more needs to be done to prevent new infections, to enhance testing, and to have persons living with HIV enrolled for lifelong, life-saving ART treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to have participated and represented our CES, Mutai Kagwe, in presenting the country position at the just completed UN General Assembly high-level meeting. And as a country, we committed to promote multisectoral leadership and accountability to end intersecting inequalities that obstruct progress in HIV response. And Kenya was very loud and firm when it talked about the need to ensure that there's universal access to comprehensive, quality, integrated combination prevention, HIV and STI treatment, and to accelerate efforts towards ensuring that there's also the triple elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, EMTCT, Hep B, and syphilis. And in this high-level meeting, we were able to talk about the need to protect the rights of people to live a life free of gender-based violence, as well as HIV-related stigma and discrimination. And Madam Siparo has mentioned this today in her opening remarks, that we've made gains, and we need to focus our gains particularly on the cohort who are born with HIV and are now in their 30s, are living with it, and to ensure that we continue fighting against HIV-related stigma. These are in addition to the local and regional global commitments that we've made in terms of HIV response, which we remain committed to. And therefore today, our convening today is very timely because it enables us to focus on our common purpose and to pull together towards attaining these goals. We do continue to provide leadership for the response at both national and county level. I'm aware county governments continue to receive technical assistance that's required to establish the relevant structures that are required and also make needed investments in the provision of HIV and AIDS and other health services. And from these efforts, all counties have developed their individual county AIDS implementation plans, which will be launched as part of this conference. And I really do commend all the 47 counties who've been able to put these plans together and who continue to implement robust HIV programs that will inch us closer towards ending HIV and AIDS. It is not lost on me the challenges that we face in funding the HIV response, particularly this year where we've had to make a lot of investments towards the COVID response. And of course, this has led sometimes to disinvestments in different disease groups. And so one of the key things that I've seen is a theme in this conference is HIV financing. And I'll be looking forward to that session, particularly to see what new information, what new knowledge, what new innovative mechanisms can we put in place when it comes to HIV financing. Despite the benefits of Kenya being rebased as a lower middle income country, new challenges emerge due to the need to fill the emerging gap in resourcing essential commodities. Kenya, however, has committed to implement long-term financing models to make concessions for local production of HIV commodities to ensure sustainability of the HIV response. And at this point, let me pause and say, and particularly to the researchers who are present, in this conference today, the young ones and the old ones, the very experienced ones. And I'm glad as I look at the program, I'm seeing names that I'm familiar with from Dr. Maritim, different other members. It would be interesting to see what the researchers and the academicians are able to tell us when it comes to local production of HIV commodities in Kenya. While scaling and ensuring that these commodities perhaps reach not just Kenya, but the East African community, how does government support local pharmaceutical industries to ensure that they can actually go through with the local production of these commodities? So this is some of the new emerging areas of research that we will be looking forward to.
We have lost you once again, Madam Cass.
Can you
hear me? If you are getting us, we have lost you from your end.
Hello, can you hear me? Am I back on? Hello, am I hear me now? Okay, great. I see someone saying that they can hear me. Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Boost your volume.
One of the key things, okay, great. What I was saying is that we need to ensure that the researchers who are present here today also provide us with new knowledge on what we need to do when it comes to really supporting local manufacturing industries and ensuring that the HIV commodities are available here. We do take note of the challenge that COVID-19 has presented, unprecedented challenges when it comes to healthcare. We've witnessed a lot of upheaval in all sections, particularly when we look at the economy, political sections, public health, a lot of upheaval all across. And we do appreciate, and I mentioned this in the beginning, all the efforts that have been made to ensure that the HIV response is not disrupted and that we're able to ensure that there's continuum of care and control of efforts. And so we thank you for all the support that you've given us. I can see different stakeholders here who have really championed and ensuring that essential services are available. Now, allow me to go back to the conference theme, the resilience and innovation of the Kenyan government and her people. On resilience, Kenyans have been consistent in holding drives to support one another. COVID-19 is no exception. We've seen community-led initiatives offering support and rescue to their community members. The faith sector, civil society has stepped up their efforts in information sharing and in maintaining the social fabric of our community society, despite the great loss to many. And I do appreciate today that we were able to have a moment of silence for those that we've lost during the COVID pandemic, healthcare workers who we've lost, but also citizens who we've lost, and particularly also those who suffer, who've been living with HIV, who have been lost through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really do thank the health workers who are still there, who continue to present themselves and who continue to fight this pandemic. We thank them for their resilience and we commend them for it. On innovation, I'm happy to highlight emerging scientific breakthroughs such as the COVID-19 vaccine and the implications of this on the HIV vaccine, especially the lessons learned and the challenges of implementation. We have witnessed a rising number of Kenyans receiving their second dose, and this is encouraging. And while we acknowledge the challenges faced, including in maintaining cold chain, securing PPEs, and vaccine hesitancy, the lessons that we're learning right now will definitely be useful when it comes to the eventual rollout of the HIV vaccine. And further, of course, we've seen the use of digital platforms, including when it comes to management of supply chains and service delivery through different mechanisms, mHealth mechanisms, telehealth mechanisms. And we would like to see that this approach integrated into the HIV programmatic care to ensure that we actually leverage on all the lessons that we learned this COVID-19 pandemic. The use of data cannot be understated, particularly as we are here today. I think today is all about data, today is all about evidence. And I like that we actually have a session that says numbers do not lie. And that is really why we are all here today. And so today I'm hoping that we'll be able to use all our results for policy formulation and analysis. I'm particularly interested in the session that talks about translating knowledge into policy and really facilitating that cycle of knowledge translation, implementation, research. And we therefore look forward to optimizing these in realization of our health targets. As I conclude, allow me to really commend NACC for organizing this conference, particularly during very challenging times. I do thank the members from MOH who've also played parts, particularly in NASCOP teams. I see the NCD teams here. I see the malaria teams who are all coming together to share different pieces of work and evidence. I thank them for their efforts and their contributions to this conference. I am confident that we shall indeed re-energize the HIV response to respond to emerging challenges, to respond to emerging infections in the scope of COVID-19, and I believe we will promote through recognition and dissemination of the efforts of our local experts to ensure that we really do produce local data and that this data is utilized. I'm especially looking forward to joining you on Wednesday while we shall be awarding our local experts, particularly looking forward to presenting the gift to the young researchers, the young emerging scientists, and to really commend their efforts and to encourage those efforts, because without you, we shall not be able to move forward as a country, particularly as we plan for the future, as we plan to ensure that we're controlling and managing the HIV response as well as other disease areas. I would like also to thank the leadership at the ministry. Waziri Mutahi Kagwe sends his greetings to the members of this conference. He was unable to join us today, but as Madam Siparo has said, he really supports particularly HIV, malaria and TB, recognizing the strategic impetus that these programs have when it comes to reducing the overall mortality in the country. And I can tell you behind the scenes, there's a lot of reform interventions that we're looking at, particularly when it comes to integrating, some of the resources that we have, reforms that touch on local manufacturing, reforms that actually also touch on self-reliance. We want to see a Kenya where, in a few years' time, we are self-reliant when it comes to the availability of these commodities and medicines. And so a lot of work is underway through the support of CS Mutahi Kagwe and all the other technical leadership teams within the Ministry of Health to ensure that really we do pay the needed attention to managing and controlling HIV and AIDS. Thank you so much again, and it is now my pleasure, and I do apologize for the technical hitches, but it is now my pleasure to declare this conference officially opened. Thank you.
Can we give another hearty clap to Madam Kass? Thank you, Daktari. Thank you, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, for that wonderful speech. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the conference is officially open, and now I take you back to the program. She is a representative from Sauti Skika, an organization for and by adolescents and young people both living with HIV and those affected by the epidemic. The goal is to ensure that the voice of adolescents and young people living with HIV is heard at all levels of HIV response. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Ruth Limo from Sauti Skika as she comes to make her remarks.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Distinguished guests, honorable audience, and everyone else who's joining us virtually, thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of young people, today my name is not Jerob. My name is Young People. I am their voice, and I'm standing here just to ensure that their needs are well amplified. We know that Kenya strives to remain on the right path towards ending AIDS as a public health threat by the year 2030, just as echoed by Mrs. Mwangangi. This will not be realized by the government alone, but we must also bring in partners, including people living with HIV in their diversities, from young people to key population, to women, men, and children. We also know that the burden of HIV has been shifting to adolescents and young people, and especially adolescents and young women. In 2019, 61% of the new HIV infections in Kenya were among young people between the ages 15 to 29 years. Many young people are unable to access sexual reproductive health and services that leave them at elevated risk of HIV and even other STIs, including unintended pregnancies. The situation has been literally made worse by the pandemic. We must also remember that related stigma and discrimination is high amongst people living with HIV in their diversities. At least this is what we have learned from the recently concluded Stigma Index conducted by the Network of People Living with HIV, in which young people were key participants, including the research coordinators and the research assistants. This only shows that as young people, we are very, very capable of taking lead in these spaces. We are very, very capable of being amplified voices for our own. The government must play a role in making sure HIV testing, prevention services, and treatment commodities are available for those who need it. We are talking about not just services, but quality, affordable services specifically tailored to fit the needs of young people and people living with HIV in their diversities. Amidst of COVID, mental health has become an urgent need for young people, both living with and affected by HIV. The struggles of COVID-19 have clearly highlighted the urgent need of mental health wellness support for our communities. We are talking about access to affordable mental health services in both national facilities to our community-based health centers being an urgent need. Our request today, on behalf of our young people, is for key stakeholders in the HIV response field to provide seats for young people to sit in your spaces, for partners to give young people the opportunity to design, implement, and even evaluate their programs. As young people, I believe that we are capable. I mean, that's why I'm here today, right? That's why I'm here. I am here on behalf of my fellow young people who are fully skilled enough to take charge in their programs. A conversation today in the morning with Dr. Catherine from NACC, and everyone else wants to know how do we bridge in the gap? How do we solve the needs of young people? How do we reduce the high prevalence rate of HIV infections among young people? And I'll honestly tell you today, the only way we solve all this is by giving young people a seat at your tables. We might not necessarily be, having the correct degrees for them, but by the fact that we have first-hand experience in these problems, I believe we have the first-hand experience in giving solutions to them. As young people, we are a voice. We are a voice that wants to ensure by the year 2030, we no longer have new infections among young people. Not necessarily among young people, but even among the general population. We have our young ones. Times have changed. We in a digital era. Conference is hybrid. So we as young people, fully equipped with skills and knowledge and experience, we request for a seat at your tables. We don't want to be involved for rubber stamping. We don't want to be involved for reporting, but we want to be involved for impact. As I conclude on behalf of young people, give us the opportunity to be the key drivers of aspects, programs, and issues affecting us. And in this context, research and innovation, we are capable. Provide the opportunities for us to learn and unlearn in order to be leaders of tomorrow. Nothing for us young people without us young people. Thank you.
Nothing for us young people without young people. Thank you very much, Ruth Limo. And at this moment, I hope now we are ready on the other side. I'd like to take you back as I invite the opening remarks from the Director of National AIDS Control Council, Dr. Ruth Masha, who is coming to us virtually. Thank you, and nakaribu.
Our guests, those who are physically present and those who are virtual, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome today to participate in the 6th Maisha HIV and AIDS Conference for the year 2021. Allow me to take this opportunity to acknowledge our chief guest, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, our chair, National AIDS Control Council, Ms. Angelina Siparo, the chair of the Council of Governors, the Health Committee, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, the chair of the Maisha Conference, Professor Kenneth Ngure, our bilateral and multilateral partners today represented by Ines Chuma, the Regional Director of UNAIDS, who is representing the UNAIDS Executive Director, Winnie Bianyima, Dr. Rudy Edgar, representing the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tamu Daniels, the Country Director Chief Lyons, President and Executive Officer of the Elizabeth Lisa Pediatric Foundation, who is also our guest today. Dr. Catherine Bugi, the head of NACC. Ruth Limo, representing adolescent and young people, and Southeast Kika movement, communities of people living with HIV, communities of people affected by HIV, the communities of research, and all scientists who have been working this journey with us in Kenya. Good morning. 37 years since we had our first HIV case officially documented in Kenya, we have gone a long way. Indeed, we have seen what a committed people and resilient response can be able to achieve. As we begin this conference, we begin with a reflection of how science and translation of science has been able to provide some wins and gains within a response that has been so much needed. Today, we celebrate the ability to keep more people on a life-saving medication. We also celebrate the fact that we've been able to reduce the number of AIDS-related deaths, although still high and regrettable. We know that progress has been made. We also would like to take this opportunity as we look at the historical perspective of our response and appreciate the partners, the US government that came into this country in 2004 and allowed us to have one of the largest programs of life-saving for people living with HIV by providing access to antiretroviral. We also do acknowledge the Global Fund that also has significantly contributed to the gains that we have today. So today, as we do reflect on the value of research in the journey of the HIV response, we know that we are on a path towards ending AIDS as a public health threat by the year 2030. And indeed, this path can be or can take us where we want to go. While we have seen progress in this last mile, we must accelerate progress. We have innovations, we have science, and we know what works. Research has evolved over the years. We now have more efficacious medications. We also have multiple choices for prevention. And all that remains is to put that science into action. So while we continue calling for research into a cure for HIV, or research that will provide a vaccine that ensure that HIV is no longer a public health threat, we have multiple choices that we can use today to stem the number of new HIV infections, but also to ensure that those people who are infected are living a dignified life. So moving forward, the priority for Kenya includes, in addition to research, the ability to use implementation science to translate and swiftly ensure that science and the products that are coming are accessible to the population and the citizen. We do admit that we've done a lot, but there's much more that is needed that we can do. We're also aware of the contributions of the research field in HIV that has also brought into light other public health concerns. HIV and related comorbidities. We have seen that in the course of the research within HIV, we've been able to look at issues such as mental health issues, issues of comorbidities such as tuberculosis, issues of cancers that are either related to HIV or cancers, just cancers on their own. And indeed, we know that the platforms that you've created for research in HIV can be used to provide solutions for many other challenges that we are facing as a country. As the National AIDS Control Council, we take this opportunity to call for funding of research. Indeed, we feel that if we aggressively continue to fund our own Kenyan-led research, we can be able to provide localized solutions and choices suited for the people within their context. We know the heterogeneity of the HIV epidemic. We also know the heterogeneity of our geographical context, and therefore we are calling for more money to research, because that's the only way we'll be able to provide people with solutions that suit their lives. Allow me to take this opportunity to applaud all the Kenyan scientists that have been working with us for the last 37 years. We'd like, on behalf of all Kenyans, to appreciate the work that you do, because indeed, you have been sitting behind the scenes, sometimes without names, sometimes with names, but your efforts in the contribution of the HIV response have been fruitful and are well appreciated. Let me take this other opportunity to also appreciate all people who have participated in the HIV research within Kenya. We've had people participating within the research for vaccines. We have people in Kenya volunteering to participate in various researches, including for the new products. Indeed, globally, most of the groundbreaking researches in HIV, Kenya has played a big role. And to that, we thank you and thank our volunteers for that act of humanity that they have provided the world. Let me take this opportunity to also acknowledge the people living with HIV. The first person publicly declaring their HIV positive status, Dr. Joe Muriuki. Today, he's still with us. But most importantly, the breaking the silence for those who departed, we also owe to them, because without them, then science would not have advanced. They confronted stigma. They allowed us to see HIV in a different perspective than we ever would think that would have seen it. They humanized HIV when it had been dehumanized. Today, many people have benefited because of the courageous efforts these people have done in the past. Today, we continue to see the movement grow, and we look forward to working with all people living with HIV to ensure that we can stop new infections from happening, but most importantly also ensure that we eliminate stigma and discrimination, and ensure that people living with HIV, wherever they are in this country, they are living a dignified life. As we come into the last mile, we have been tested with another pandemic, one that has been so vicious in many other parts of the world. Again, we see the role the HIV structures, systems, trainings that we've done in the past, including our community volunteers, have done to complement the work that we have done on the fight against COVID-19. As we continue on this journey, we will not want to drop the ball of the HIV epidemic, especially in the country. Because we know when two pandemics or epidemics interact, and one of them is dropped off the ball, the consequences can be devastating. And as such, as we get into the last mile, despite the challenges we are facing with COVID-19, we need to strive to continue not just with research, but ensuring that we become more effective and providing the resources that we have to make sure that we are also addressing other diseases. So with that, allow me to say that at the National AIDS Control Council, as we start this conference, we would like to welcome all of you, and we look forward towards the outcome that we can all be able to implement the actions that have been provided by our stakeholder so that we can achieve that really last mile we so desire. Thank you very much.
Chief guests, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, Minister.
Asante, thank you for that. Thank you, the Director of National AIDS. At this moment, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Dr. Catherine Ngugi. Dr. Catherine Ngugi is the head of NACC that leads Kenyan health sector response to HIV and AIDS, sexually transmitted infection, that is STIs, and viral hepatitis through policy and guidelines.